Hello friends, thank you for joining me today. This is my monthly wrap up for all of the books that I read in April, and it was a lot. I think audiobooks really just did me a solid in April, and I just finished a lot of books that I do own physically, but that I decided to go the audiobook route. So let's go ahead and get into it, because this might be a little bit of a longer video because I did read a lot of books. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I started off April with an atypical pick for me, and it was The House We Grew Up In by Jewell. I did listen to the audiobook for this, narrated by Karina Fernandez, and this follows a British family that includes a husband and wife and their 4 kids, following them throughout the years and how all of their lives have been affected by their mom's severe hoarding disorder. And they all, have their own issues. They all have unlikable qualities. There is drama, poor decisions, there's tragedy, and I ended up giving this 5 stars. I am not normally the biggest fan of like heavily character-driven stories, especially contemporary ones. However, this is relevant to my interests because I am fascinated by hoarding disorder. I have watched many an episode of Hoarders, especially on YouTube in the last few months. This was not a fun read. It was quite sad, and I was a little bit relieved when I had finished it that it was over, but it was captivating, and I suppose that you could call this like domestic thriller, I guess, but thriller is almost too strong of a word. Thriller to me just kind of implies more plot than there really is in this book. It's a drama. Everyone has their own secrets and resentments and trauma, and it's about just how this family deals with those things and how they affect each of them differently. And I could definitely understand not wanting to read about these characters once you just kind of see the way that they are, but I was just fascinated by the drama of it all, relieved that what's happening with them has never happened to me. So yeah, if you want a fraught, character-driven family drama with a hoarding mother at the center of it all, this was great. This is my second Jewell. I've also read one of her most super popular ones, Then She Was Gone, and I'm definitely interested in reading more by her. I think that she mostly does domestic thrillers, some of her books have mystery crime elements, but yeah, so I don't know, count this book among a few other 5 stars I've read that I wouldn't describe as enjoyable, but were still very compelling. Coyote by Steele. This is a sci-fi novel about a group of colonists who escape from this repressive regime on Earth by hijacking a spaceship upon its launch that is headed for a habitable planet called Coyote, with the intent to start a new life there. And it's told in several parts, each part with a different point of view and different kind of style of storytelling, all about the journey to this planet, then landing there and making a human settlement and exploring this new planet. This was 3.75 stars. The first part, the first story, takes place on Earth, and it did kind of drag for me. I wanted to get to the space travel and the alien planet, so once I kind of pushed through that first story, this was an interesting read. I do tend actually to enjoy certain dry technical stuff when it comes to sci-fi, so all of the stuff about how things work on the ship, or details about Coyote, like how the seasons and time works there, how the planet is laid out, I really enjoyed. And obviously anytime that there was an alien creature or plant or any kind of life, I just eat that stuff up. I wish that there was more alienness and danger from that side of it, but that's just kind of a personal preference. And this is primarily a survival story and exploring this new world. It's not chock full of aliens or strange things like that. The planet is Earth-like. There are some kind of exasperating teenage characters, but I think that they were written age appropriately. They are teenagers, so it's not like a mark against the book. I wasn't particularly invested in any single character though. And there were also a lot of grammatical and spelling errors in the second half. I'm not sure why the editing got so lax, but to me it was a little distracting. There are 2 more books in the series, plus a few more like side novels kind of, or like a continuation of some sort. You could read this as a standalone though, and I'm not sure that I'm compelled necessarily to continue this series, but it was a good read overall. I just love going to alien planets. Juniper and Thorn by Ava Reid. I listened to the audiobook, which was narrated by Stina Nielsen. This is a gothic YA fantasy about a girl named Marlinchin who is a witch, along with her 2 sisters. And they all live under the oppressive thumb of their abusive father, who is a powerful wizard who he's very controlling. He doesn't really let them leave their property. And one night she sneaks out with her sister to the ballet, where she immediately falls for the lead dancer in the performance, which kind of kicks off the events of the book. And this was a 2.5 star for me. It had beautiful writing. At times it strayed close to being purple. It was fairly flowery, which I generally don't love. Marlinchin has like a really sad and tragic story, and like she will purge after eating. So she has an eating disorder. She's constantly talked down to by her father and sometimes her sisters too. She just like lives in fear. And she survives a lot just by existing, so I totally respect that. But to me, she was not a very engaging main character because she was so broken down and timid. And what is supposed to be a big moment of triumph for her at the end of the book, it's completely snatched out of her hands by a man, which it just made me really mad. I didn't like that. And the pace of this was very strange. I never really knew where it was going, and not in the fun like mystery thriller way. Just like things would just randomly happen, and then another thing would happen. I don't know, it was just weird. So yeah, this just didn't captivate me for the most part. I have hope that maybe I'll enjoy her most popular book, which is A Study in Drowning. You may have heard of that over this. So hoping that I enjoy that more. We will see, but this was not for me. Hellbent by Leigh Bardugo. The audiobook, which I listened to, was narrated by Lauren Fortgang and Michael David Axtell, and this is the second book in the Alex Stern series, probably better known in general by the first book, which is Ninth House. This is an adult urban fantasy series that takes place at Yale University and follows a girl named Alex Stern who has the ability to see ghosts and is recruited into a secret society that is responsible for monitoring the other secret societies and their occult activities at Yale. And Hellbent continues one of the main plot threads of the first book, which is trying to find and rescue her missing mentor, a guy named Darlington. And this was a 2.5 star. Honestly, I should have just DNF'd this series after Ninth House, which was a 3.5 star for me. It was too slow and belaboring the point. The main goal took too long to achieve, and the plot, it kept dangling success in front of me, but not quite giving it over. And when the main goal is achieved, there is like absolutely zero emotional impact on the character or the reader. And very similar to the first book, there were moments that I was interested in what was going on and was enjoying the story. There were scenes that were well written. But overall, this, I don't know, this story just isn't for me. Like, even with elements that I would typically generally enjoy, like, you know, dark vibes, the occult, creatures, things like that. And honestly, like, urban fantasy can be a hit or miss for me, I think. And it was not a hit in this case, and I'm not really sure that I'm like a dark academia girly either. So yeah, I'm DNFing the series. The third book is coming out this September, and the cover has a barn owl on it, which is my favorite kind of owl. It's really pretty, so bummer that I won't like have a home for it on my shelves. But yeah, I will be freeing up the space that the first 2 books took up, which was quite a lot, so that's a plus. The Gathering Dark, an anthology of folk horror. This was edited by Tori Bovalino and features 10 short stories by 10 different authors. And I did listen to this on audiobook, which was narrated by Shantae McCormick and Josh Bloomberg. And so, I don't know, I'm not super knowledgeable about folk horror, but I'll say that most of these stories didn't really give folk horror vibes to me. I don't know. These read more just like straight up like supernatural horror, in my opinion. You know, not that they don't overlap or anything, but I don't know, like I've seen the movie Midsommar, and these were not that kind of story. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 overall. I did rate each story separately on Goodreads. You can see what I gave each of them, and they average out to about a 3 altogether. And this is very much a YA collection. All the main characters are about 18 years old in like high school. And I think in all but the last story, they take place in modern day. And the first story was excellent, and I'd say the only one that was a 5-star. And the last 2 were also very good. I gave them 4 stars. The rest were like 3s and 2s. And I would say that this is also a queer collection. Most of the main characters are queer. There were lots of ghosts, supernatural things, and themes of change, of loss, of friendship, and love, and trauma. So like, it wasn't a bad read, it just wasn't like an incredible collection of really amazing stories. I'd say if anything, it was a fun experience because I don't really read anthologies. I've read, I think, literally one other short story collection by Ray Bradbury, I think. So this was a, you know, kind of a quick read and a break from my normal reading habits. The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. This is an adult fantasy and the first in what will be a trilogy, the Eternal Path trilogy. And you're following this scholar named Nema, who serves the emperor who is at the end of his reign. And a competition is being held with, you know, the best of the best to choose the new emperor. But the night before the trials begin, one of the contenders is murdered, and Nema is tasked with finding the killer while the show goes on. There's court intrigue, trials of the body and the mind, a prickly romantic subplot that does not overshadow the plot. There's delightful humor in both the characters themselves and the enigmatic narrator. There are occasionally footnotes. This book had so many things that I love, and it was a 5-star, which was very much a surprise. This was our book club pick for April, and one that I had heard of it, but it just, I don't know, didn't really grab my attention when it first came out. So I'm glad that I was destined to read it, and this is on the longer side. It's around like 650 pages, but in my opinion, it isn't just full of filler, like pointless scenes. It all serves the plot and the mystery. I thought that the pacing was good for a 650-page book. The world building was great. What we get to see of the world. The characters were great, whether they were main characters or side characters or even like the villains. Like, I just really enjoyed it. I basically only had like one distinct critique that I have to be vague about. Basically, it just has to do with a major reveal near the end. And the reveal kind of happens twice, once to like the reader and then to other people, and I wish that the first time it had happened, the reveal could have been actually the second time that it happened, because I just think that the shock of it would have been more powerful if it was explained after it happens to that second audience. But this was great. I really enjoyed it, and will definitely be continuing on when the next book comes out. Driftwood by Marie Brennan, narrated by Christina Delane. I listened to this on audiobook, and this is a fantasy novel set in the world of Driftwood, which is not really a world at all. It's a place where an untold number of worlds are pulled together in the wake of their end. It's where worlds come to die. And like, you might be standing in your world right here, but the next street over is literally another world that is home to another race of people. And eventually all worlds are just consumed at the center, called the Crush, and just ground out of existence. And this story is hinged around this man called Last, who has been around for longer than anyone can remember, for generations, and people seek him out for various reasons. And people have gathered together to tell stories about him. So this book is basically a collection of short stories in this mashup universe, but they're being told, these stories are being told to an audience who have gathered in this place wondering what has happened to Last. He's kind of disappeared, and people are sharing their tales. So it's not just a short story collection, but it kind of is presented that way. And it's so unique. This was a 5-star. I didn't own this book when I listened to it on audiobook, but as soon as I finished it, I had to go out and get a copy of it, because it's probably my favorite book I've read this year, a new favorite. I was not expecting this story to be so colorful, so beautiful, and melancholy, but also hopeful, just delicately hopeful in the face of just the slow inevitability of annihilation. I don't know, it was captivating, just definitely something special, a diamond in the rough, that will stick with me for a long time. It does have kind of an inconclusive ending. So I don't know, maybe consider that if you hate when things don't wrap up completely. But I think that it suited the overall vibe. I would love to return to the world of Driftwood. Marie Brennan also wrote the Memoirs of Lady Trent, historical fantasy series that I love here. The first book I ever reviewed on this channel was A Natural History of Dragons, which is the first book in that series. So Marie Brennan has a special place in my heart, and I'm just blown away by this random book of hers that's just been on my TBR for 6 years, and I only just now read. So yeah, I don't know, highly recommend this. This is just what I would call a hidden gem. The Forgotten Beasts of Eld by Patricia A. McKillip. This is a classic fantasy following a wizard named Sybil, who lives a solitary life and has this menagerie of legendary magical animals at her beck and call. And one day, a soldier arrives at her gates and begs her to take an infant boy into her care. And it leads to a tale of love and revenge. This was a 3.5 star. This originally came out in the 70s, and I do prefer more modern prose in general than what this was, just personal preference. It does kind of read like a fairy tale in that way, which can be a hit or miss for me, just depends. And at first I was just kind of lukewarm about the story, but actually it does gain some gravitas and depth and, darkness in the themes. Sybil is a powerful woman who both subjugates and becomes subjugated, and she has to deal with very strong human emotions and the effects that her actions have on the people around her. I did enjoy the ending, although, I don't know, I'm not sure my ultimate feelings about Sybil. I didn't find her the most likable protagonist, but this did have some beautiful, like, poetic passages and quotes. The magical animals were neat. And I can totally see how this is a beloved classic. And even though I didn't love it, it's still special to me because this is one of my aunt's favorite books. I have finally read it and, will cherish my copy because it reminds me of her whenever I look at it. The 13th Child by Erin A. Craig. I listened to a lot of this on audiobook, but finished it out physically. The audiobook was narrated by Christine Lacken, and this is a YA fantasy with horror elements about a girl named Hazel who has been promised to the god of death since she was an infant. And you follow her growing up, waiting for her godfather to come and whisk her away. She lives a pretty sad and miserable life, and then you see her grow up under death's wing and with the goal of actually becoming a healer, one of the best in the kingdom. And when she's older, she eventually finds herself in the royal palace, commanded to basically save the life of the king. And this was a 4.5 star, and I'm very glad I enjoyed this because I actually wasn't a fan of Craig's most recent release, which was A Land So Wide. So, we're back to giving her books high ratings. The pacing of this was on the slower side, and for a while, you're just watching Hazel go about her life. The plot with the king doesn't really kick in until like halfway through, and if this had been written, I don't know, in a more boring way with more boring characters, I could easily have found this too slow. But because I enjoyed the writing and Hazel as a character, I just enjoyed the whole journey. The God of Death goes by Merrick, and he is so cool. There are multiple gods in this book, and I loved every time like they interacted with mortals. That's a trope that I love. Like with the Raven Scholar, like when gods play active roles in the story and interact with people. This had some dark and sad moments and moments of horror that kind of hit me and that I enjoyed. There's a small romantic subplot involving the king's son that I was fine with. It was very much a subplot. This was a gothic, dark fantasy with themes of life and death and love and, the things that we'll do for love. And it wraps up nice and conclusively by the end. It was a great read. And the artwork is so beautiful, and it has really pretty gold gilded edges. This is such a pretty book. So this makes the fourth book by Craig that I have given 5 stars, or rounded, or at least rounded up from a 4 point something. The only exception was, as I mentioned, A Land So Wide. As I mentioned before, love Erin A. Craig. The Art Thief by Michael Finkel. This is a nonfiction, which I rarely read, about this guy named, I'm going to try, Stefan Breitweiser. I tried. So this guy stole hundreds of pieces of art totaling millions of dollars, billions even, from museums across Europe over several years starting in the 1990s. But unlike most art thieves, he never sold any of it because his motivation wasn't money. It was this intense passion and love for art and just wanting to possess art. And he displayed all of this stolen stuff in his attic, where he and his accomplice girlfriend would just lay down and admire it from their 4-poster bed. And they kept thieving until the guy finally slipped up. And this was a surprising 5-star with really cool sprayed edges with bats on them. So I think that this is a great read if you're like me, someone who is a little intimidated by nonfiction, maybe just isn't really super interested in nonfiction to begin with generally. It's very quick. It's about 200 pages, and it's told in a more narrative style rather than just throwing facts at you. It just read like a low barrier to entry kind of book. It's not, like a super heavy or intense subject. It's interesting. You learn, a bit about the world of art thievery and just like what was going on through this guy's head, and I just really enjoyed it. Okay, so the last thing that I read in April was an audiobook, and that was Bloom by Delilah S. Dawson, narrated by Sarah Beth Pfeiffer. And this is a contemporary romance horror about this woman named Ro, who has recently broken up with her boyfriend and is trying to move forward with her life. And one weekend at a farmer's market, she meets this woman named Ash, who sells homemade cupcakes and soaps and plants, house plants. She's just beautiful and enchanting, and Ro kind of falls for her immediately. And this follows their growing romance with these occasional moments that are a little concerning, but Ro just brushes them under the rug because she's infatuated. And this was a strange one. I gave it 3.5 stars. This is a novella. It was the audiobook was less than 7 hours. It's about, I think, 200 pages physically. And I'm glad that it was that short. Otherwise, this would have been a disappointment and a lower rating because I was expecting more horror vibes. The cover is giving, major botanical horror, but honestly, this was mostly just a very charming contemporary romance for the most part. There are red flags that Ro pointedly ignores, and it adds this sprinkling of unease, but I don't know, not enough for me to enthusiastically call this horror until you reach the 85% mark, and then the horror kicks in. Even though it was very predictable horror. Although the very, very, very final scene got me and made me go oh yeah, that's scary. So I don't know, this wasn't bad, but it surprised me how mundane and not horror-y the majority of this was. I also didn't love the narration of this, sadly. I think the audiobook was a little overacted. And those are all the things that I read in April. I think my camera actually shut off at one point. I was filming for so long. So thank you for sticking around. I read a lot of books in April. At the moment, I am currently, so it's May, kind of nearing the end of May, and I like to read Fae May theme. So I am currently, I'm only a couple hours away from being done with House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas. I will be glad to be done with that, and then I will be all ready for the next ACOTAR book, which will be coming out in October, I think. So yeah, trying to get through Crescent City, which I don't love. It's my least favorite of her series for sure. And then I am reading the second book in Emily Wilde's series, so Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands, and that's very fun and charming. I just started kind of a random sci-fi book called Alone Out Here. It's a YA kind of dystopian post-apocalyptic sci-fi about these kids who escape kind of the end of the world on Earth and are up in space, and it's kind of just them trying to survive. So yeah, just started that, but definitely a heavy start. Yeah, very scary start. So yeah, that was a lot of books in April. I think a couple times my voice kind of cracked because I've been talking nonstop for a long time. But thank you so much for watching. And yep, it's not quite close enough to the end of May for me to just go in and film a May wrap up, because I am definitely going to finish at least 2 books before the end of May, which is the Sarah J. Maas and Emily Wilde's. I'm kind of close to being done with both of those. So thank you so much for watching. Hope you're having a great spring and a great reading month, and I will see you guys in my next one. Bye!